Hi, everybody. My name is Suzette Martinez Standring, and welcome to It's All Right with Suzette, a half-hour show on the craft of writing and special authors. And today, our featured author is June Ahern of San Francisco, who wrote How to Talk with Spirits, a fascinating nonfiction book. June Ahern is a teacher, a psychic medium, and the featured star of the Haunted Bay series on YouTube and on Amazon Prime. Here's a juicy tidbit. A movie is going to be made about one of the murder cases that she worked on, and Hollywood director Quentin Lee has cast Veronica Cartwright in the role to play June Ahern. I am so looking forward to this show today. So without further ado, welcome June Ahern.
Thank you, Suzette. I'm looking forward to it also.
This is really great. So let me start with your book, How to Talk with Spirits. What is it about and what inspired you to write this?
It's about a book that takes a sensitive and often unusual subject. And what I wanted was to put it in some kind of reasonable, logical way that people could say, could I really talk to spirits? Is it reasonable? And if I do, what happens? And that's the most important part, is I wanted to bring it down to more of a simplicity of really what could take place. The person that inspired me to do this was a friend, and he sent me a PM that his angels came to him and said I should write this book. And I declined it several times. I said, there's so many books out there. I'm not going to write another book. I'd already written 3. I was marketing those. And then finally I said, okay, a really short little book. And then I started to get into it. And since then he has passed, but he was the one that said, you need to write this book. And that's how it came to be.
Now, there are many skeptics who would say that it's not real, they don't believe it. And so, number one, what could people hope to benefit from messages from the other world, from loved ones? And how can people tell if they're really in contact with the dead?
That I think it's really reasonable to have a certain amount of skepticism. And in my book, all I say to people is keep an open mind. You don't have to believe all of it. You could believe some of it. Or what do you think about it? I myself have skepticisms about quite a few of the metaphysical paranormal world, but I investigate it. And what people will get from my book is an opportunity to explore the idea. And if it's possible, as you say, what kind of benefits? Well, one thing is when we love somebody, whether it's a person or a pet, it's so painful when they leave this physical world. And perhaps it can comfort people. Perhaps it can answer a question. You may have had a disagreement. I mean, let's face it, sometimes we have disagreements and then the person dies, passes over, and you think, oh my God, I'll never be able to. And this gives people an opportunity to sort that out and write it, often write it by communicating.
Now, is it possible to do this sort of thing on your own, or do you need a medium to be the intermediary between the spirit world and the living?
This book absolutely supports you doing it on the own. And one chapter is quite long about how you could do that, how it takes place. It's not often in words. Dreams are the best way to get messages. Let's face it, though, when we're grieving, even me, when I had a devastating leave my life, a sister leave my life, I went to a medium because my emotions were so bound, they're just like that. I did go to a medium, but in time, I was communicating with my sister on my own.
You know, there were a couple of standout chapters that make your book unique from other types of books on this subject. Do you want to share about that?
Well, I addressed chapter 1 right away. Questions from the Curious Living. Before I wrote the book, I kind of started and I thought, there's too many books out there. And I said, what I'm going to do is find out, what do people want? What do my readers want? I mean, I have a lot of knowledge and many, many paranormal experiences, more than the average Joe or Joette. And I just wanted to give people, what do you want? Not what do I know? I already know what I know. And I sent out an email to some friends and clients, and they sent it on to Suzette. I got a ton of questions. And so some of them I had to, kind of put it together. And that was my first chapter. And to me, that is one of the most important chapters of the whole book. It answers numerous questions. What's the difference between spirits and ghosts? What about if you have an evil spirit, and all kinds of questions? How about pets? How do I communicate with them? Yeah.
I did notice that, and I know that some other writers had advised you to keep the Q&A to the end. I found that opening chapter to be fantastic because it covered a whole array of questions and concerns right off the bat. And it made it clear to me that this book was for everyone. I think that some people might presume, because of the title, that it's about how to be a medium, but it really isn't. It's so much about the wisdom and insight that you can get from this form of communication, the kind of comfort. Do you want to talk a little bit about that quiz that's in your book?
The what?
The quiz?
Oh, my quiz. Oh my God, I love my quiz. So I just came up with this years ago when I was teaching ESP and tarot class. And I thought, people should learn about how do they experience extrasensory perceptions of self. And it's a real easy quiz, and it deals mostly with telepathy, which every person that I know of has had some experience in telepathy. And it takes you through there, and it goes a little deeper. The wonderful part about the quiz is the answers. Not only does it tell you, kind of, this is you're really a big medium, or you've got to work on this, or but it gives you ways of how to do it. Not only answers it, how can you be more open psychically? My quiz, I love my quiz.
What I do love so much about how to talk with spirits is that it doesn't have any kind of religious inclination. It respects all faiths. And I think that spirit is something that's alive in many universal faiths. In one form or another, there's a recognition, whether it's, spirits or saints or, just other beings that help us in this life. And I found that one section that brought particular comfort to me was where you were told by spirits what exactly happens on the other side. I think that many of us mere mortals think that there's some kind of judgment of evil and good and punishment. And it was surprising to me to find that it wasn't that way at all. It was a matter of evolution on the other side. And you talked about a tribunal. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in my studies, and which are really extensive on this, is that when I read that when we go to the other side, first we're met by our loved ones, because let's face it, you get off the train or the plane or whatever, and you're like, where am I? And then you go in front of a panel, so to speak, of higher beings, whether it be angels, however you want to look at the higher beings of wisdom and knowledge. And they take you through a process of looking at your life, not in a way where you're being judged, good, bad, or indifferent. You're saying, how did that work for you? What did you learn from that? What would you like to learn more about? Perhaps it was showing mercy. Perhaps it wasn't gossiping. Perhaps it had to do with feeling defeated when you knew that you had an opportunity to call upon a spiritual helper. And then when you have completed that, they say, well, why don't you rest for a while and heal? Most of us got to the other side because we wore something out in the body, or it was a tragic accident of some kind. So you want to rest the body and heal the body. And this is beautiful because you're surrounded by etherical healers. And then you're assigned a little job on the other side. What do you want to do while you're here? If anyone believes in reincarnation, before you come back, hopefully you're coming back with many more lessons and you're healed, much more than when you left.
Now, in your book, just as you say, and in your book, you say that the dead, when they get to the other side, their jobs aren't done. It's a matter of evolving into a higher place. And that can be done by realizing the mistakes they made here on Earth, things that they can do to personally grow on the other side, perhaps seeing the consequences of their actions. Now, you talk about how we here on earth can help those spirits to evolve on the other side. And how does that happen?
The more that we ourselves heal from our own, say, negative experiences, negative thoughts, the more that we heal and we think more open-minded and we pray for them. Prayer. I am a prayer. I pray quite a bit. I pray every day. And so as we pray that we say rest in peace, and may also they be joyful. May they feel the love of whatever divine that you want to address. And the more that we heal, the more they have an opportunity to heal also. That's important to know. If we hang on to our great sadness, why did you leave me? And I was no good and you hurt me and all that, they also can't evolve because they keep dealing with you. And you don't want that to happen when someone passes over.
Well, I will say that your book was very effective because before we go on break, I want to share this result from your book. I've always had issues, not serious, severe, terrible issues with my father, but I guess you would say run of the mill resentments or whatever. After reading your book, I realized that my forgiveness and my prayer for him could really help him evolve on the other side. And I did exactly that.
Oh,
And one night I was standing in my dining room, and I'm not kidding you, I felt a finger on the back of my shoulder. It was like someone was kind of touching me. And I said out loud, "Dad, is that you?" And I really felt like he was letting me know that he was helped and that he heard my forgiveness and my prayers for him. So it is really powerful what you've written. There's so much comfort in your book, June.
beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that personal story and experience.
Now, we have a couple of minutes here. What do you say to people who say this is not possible? I don't believe this at all. Is it possible that they could still get a message from someone else, or does their disbelief and resistance completely close them off to any possibility of a comforting message or contact?
I think both, Suzette. I think that if they completely do not believe in any afterlife, like, hey, this is all she wrote kind of a thing, well, then they'll stay in that place. And again, in my book, I often say, just keep an open mind. This is what happened. I have heard people tell me that they didn't believe in it. And after a loved one or, just even a friend down the street, and they said, oh my God, I had a dream of them. And then I felt like I actually saw them outside the next day. When someone has their own experience, it's very difficult to deny completely. You don't have to be into it the way I'm into it. That's my thing, or someone else's. But once you experience a communication with spirit and you feel it, not just think it, but you actually are aware of it, it's very difficult to deny. You cannot change other people's minds. And I don't try to. I honestly don't do, I say, whatever you think is right. I don't get into the controversy. I don't get into prove it to me. I don't have to prove anything to anyone.
Mhm.
If they want to experience it, they can. And my book gives them the opportunity to do that.
Now we're going to take a break. And in a little bit, we're going to return to this fascinating conversation with June Ahern, author of How to Talk with Spirits. We'll be back in a moment. Thank you. And welcome back to It's All Right with Suzette, and our featured author is June Ahern. We're having a fascinating conversation about her new book, How to Talk with Spirits. Now, June, I know we have known each other for many, many years, and this ability of yours has been a lifelong gift. And I think many viewers are probably interested to find out how you acquired this gift. Can you tell us about the event that changed everything?
As a young woman, I was in a near fatal car accident. And I had the experience of, well, a near-death experience in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I expired for seconds, just heart stopped beating. And what I know some people say I shouldn't say it like this. They rejected me at the pearly gates and told me to go back. And honestly, I didn't want to come back. And talk about a gate. I was standing outside of an ornate white gate looking into a garden. One could think of it as a garden party. And there were relatives in there. There were people I didn't know, but they were so joyful, so tranquil. I will use the word tranquil, tranquility. And it just was so beautiful that I wanted to join them. And my grandparents came to the gate and they smiled at me, they acknowledged me, and then they said, "Not now, June, go back," from Scotland, "Go back, June." And there I was. I woke up in the hospital. I had major surgery. It was a very difficult time in my life. It just set a course for my life. And after that, I began to know things about people that I never even met. Know places, situation, and that's how it started.
Now, this was back in the 1960s, right?
70 it was actually
19,
1970, yeah.
1970. And I can recall that at that time, unlike today, where you have, Long Island medium, Hollywood medium, where these things are pretty commonplace, right? Back then, if anybody knew that you were going through that, they would think that you had a psychosis or a mental illness. So you probably kept it under wraps for a long
Oh yeah.
time.
It was such a difficult time. Who could I tell? As you say nowadays, oh, near death experience. They have these huge groups that meet all over the world that talk about it. Back then, especially in my own religion, belief, you just did not talk about those kinds of paranormal experiences or metaphysical experiences, even though from the 60s we all began to learn about Buddhism and such like that. And it wasn't until Dr. Raymond Moody came out with Life After Life, which was a groundbreaking book for most people. There's always certain groups that already knew about this, but it became more public. And then my father, who I was really surprised, I mean, he was a very staunch Catholic man, he gave me the book. And I didn't really tell anybody, Suzette. I could not even talk about what I experienced. You're talking 8 years later. And he gave it to me, and I don't know why, and maybe he didn't know why, but I felt like then I could finally say, I had one of those experiences. So it took years for me to be able to be open about it.
And part of your career was as an intuitive counselor. I know that nowadays you're a teacher and you're involved in TV and things like that. But back then you were an intuitive counselor. And I found that one of the things that I learned about getting a really good reading was not about predictions, but it was about insights into one's character and thoughts from loved ones who had passed that could help a person. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I started, I became involved with the tarot cards, and that's about 1972, 1973, around that time, when there were not a lot of people that were doing it. And the teacher said, you're very good at this. So I started reading for people. Anyone who knew me knew I was carrying my cards. Everybody became my guinea pigs. And I began to learn, and I was very good about precognition. I was able to tell people things were going to happen. In time, I realized, well, I would rather work with a person here and now and how to see them beyond making predictions about them. And I started teaching the tarot. I started teaching ESP. It was and it still is very important for me to teach people that you can do this psychic mind, you can develop it. And that's how I went around my business. And, Suzette, I never advertised to do readings, ever. It was always word of mouth from 1975 when I had my three first clients. And I was busy every single week and month for years based on that. So it was meant to be. But I did advertise classes, but never for a reading.
Well, that's how you and I met. way back in the day. I think it was like in the 1980s. And we don't have time to go into that, but suffice it to say, I took a class from you, and it really did open up another aspect, another realm in my own personality and being. And I felt pretty happy that you said I was one of your star pupils. So
Yeah,
here we are,
yes, you
June.
absolutely were. It was meant for you. And the way I look at it is I'll give you information, I'll present it, you experience it for yourself. If it works for you and it allows your life to be a better life, a more fulfilling life, great. If it doesn't, well, it's just something else you learn. Go on to whatever interests you. That's how I actually think about the whole subject.
Now, June, a movie is going to be made about one of the murder cases that you worked on with police in San Francisco. And Hollywood director Quentin Lee is really pursuing this film project and has cast Veronica Cartwright to play you. I think it's incredibly exciting. Now, can you tell us about that murder case and what is the film going to be about? And what was that experience like for you back in the day?
I want to tell everyone who thinks like, oh, murder, it is a frightening, sad experience. There is nothing thrilling about working on a murder case at all. And a friend came to me, and she had, well, actually, I went to the friend. I had this dream of this woman, and they told me to go to my friend. It was her neighbor that knew the sister of the woman that was murdered. That's how I became involved. And I had a dream about the woman being murdered, being chased to her house. It was terrifying. It was horrible. I woke up and I'm like, oh my God. And it came in time that the sister of the murdered woman went to the police and asked me to, give them information. And that's how I really became involved with this. That was one of the murder cases. I also worked on another one, and finally the murderer, the killer, was incarcerated. It just got out a couple of years ago, actually, and that was from the 80s. But that's how the murder case, and I had met Quentin when he wanted to have a walkthrough, a paranormal investigation of his family's home in San Francisco. And I met him then. He read my book and he was very taken in by this particular case and asked me, could we do a movie on this? And I said, well, why don't you go ahead and write the script and we'll look at it from there. And that's how it started to happen. And there it is. And Veronica and I had a long chat. She wanted to know how I felt and my gestures and all of that. She and I had a long Zoom meeting.
That is one of the things that really struck me, because one often thinks, wow, you have this power and you can help find killers and all that stuff. And they see the excitement about it all, but they don't realize that you physically go through the terror of the victim. You relive her experience and you see everything that's going on at the time it happens. And I can't even imagine what that horrific experience could be. And I read that Veronica Cartwright took the role because she thought it would be a great acting challenge to be able to convey that.
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
June, I know that we have about 5 minutes left, and I know that you teach workshops. Can you just give us a rundown of the titles of some of the workshops you've given and how people can find you and sign up and register for some of these terrific classes?
Yeah, so I just started when the pandemic started. And I said, well, I'd like to share what I have. Getting older, I'd like to share what I have. And some of the besides the Halloween celebration ritual, which just was like burst at the seams with people were very interested. One of the most popular was the karma talk, and I've been asked to do that one again. People love that one. Also, how to heal, with the dead, how to heal and how to contact the dead. And then coming up in February, of course, I'll be doing my karmic relationships, soul, heart, and flame mates. And then in March, I have my first guest speaker of a young woman that will talk about healing tragedy in her life. She experienced in her family suicide, tragic ending of her young brother, and a murder of a brother-in-law, and so she will talk about her way of how you can heal the tragedy and the trauma that is set in you. So these are the kinds of talks I give. I give many different topics. What I do is I ask people that are again. I ask people, what would you like to learn about? Because as I say, I have so much to offer people, and that is on Zoom, and it's usually the third Thursday. People can get a hold of me through my website at June Ahern, Ahern, juneahern.com, or you can email me at june@sfcoaching.com.
Well, that's really fantastic, June. And now I know that you've written 2 fiction books, City of Redemption and The Sky in June, along with a nonfiction book, Timeless Counselor, and of course your new one, How to Talk with Spirits. What are you working on now?
Well, I really should be working on it. I have part of the sequel to The Sky in June because it's a very popular book. I mean, it is an overwhelmingly very popular book, and people have been asking me forever where the sequel is. And then I got into writing other books. So mostly my presentations, I think, is really important right now to teach people while I'm still able to teach, while I'm still in body, so to speak. And that has a great flame in my heart to teach people.
Well, you are a very good teacher. And what I learned from you and other classes that I've taken through through the years is that everybody has a level of extrasensory perception, intuition, as it were. And you could really develop it in ways, as you always emphasize, not so much for predictions, because everyone has free will to change their circumstances, but to really gain insight into what keeps you making the wrong decisions, or karmic ties, or any manner of things. I mean, it's just another level of information. So is there,
The thing I like to do is I like to teach
yes.
elementary. I'm sorry, Suzette.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead. You like to
I really have an aim in my class to teach it at such a basic level that and children, kids ask me all the time, and they're way better than adults to deal with. And so that's something I really aim for, is how to give it to you in a simple terms, because it can get very lofty, so to speak.
June, it has been such a pleasure to have you here today. Give us your website one more time and your email.
Okay, so it's June Ahern, Ahern.com. And on there, it gives all the information we spoke about, what classes next, and what I'm doing, and all of my social media pages.
June, thank you so much for being here. It was so exciting to get all the information. We're going to all look forward to your movie whenever it comes out. When will that be? This year or next, do you think?
Well, most likely next year. They're going to start filming. Hopefully they're going to be able to start filming the summer of this year. And I want to go down and be like Alfred Hitchcock. I want to have a cameo role, but I'm hoping it's going to be this year. Yeah.
Well, thanks again. And look for June on YouTube under the Haunted Bay series as well. Until the next time, this is Suzette signing off. Thanks again for being with me on It's All Right with Suzette. Happy writing, everyone.